Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Riley from the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club, and on this particular ride it would just be Chris on his HP2 and me on my old F800GS heading out for a little ride on some familiar trails. It was late September, September 28th, and we were already at 13 degrees in the morning, so this is unseasonably warm for this part of the country, so we were looking forward to getting in some riding without freezing our bits off. So we of course started at the Tim Hortons in Hawkesbury, and then we headed off towards the Scotch Road. There was definitely something happening with the temperature because it was super foggy and humid, and even though it was 13 degrees, we weren't super well dressed, and I know Chris was complaining about being cold, but we had high hopes that the sun would burn this fog off and it would be a nice day. The first stop when we do the Scotch is usually the little sand pit, and it's actually changed quite a bit over the years. There's been a few more interesting little climbs added. The bowl's a little steeper, and here you're riding along with Chris as he zooms around. You can see by all the tire tracks that this is a relatively well-used little spot, and on a day like today where the sand is a bit wet, the traction is really nice, and you can see the fall colors are starting to change, so the leaves are getting all pretty. And you can also sadly see some garbage there that Chris drove by. So this is a spot where I think people come to party, and sadly they don't pack out their trash. So we're always worried that one day we'll get here and it'll be posted because some jerks left a bunch of crap behind. This is such a great spot for people who are starting off because this is really soft, nice sand. There's not a lot of buried rocks, so you can bring pretty much any bike here. Bomb around and fall, and you're not likely to get hurt, and even your bike is unlikely to get scratched. And there we had a little near miss. You may have noticed the big water hole kind of puddle in the middle of this pit, and there was a time when we spent a lot of time frolicking in that water, but we got tired of changing wheel bearings, so we try to spend a little less time driving through deep water needlessly. Now on this particular day, Chris actually had to be home by noon. He had a family event going on, so we were on a pretty tight schedule, and whenever we're on a tight schedule, the number one spot to go is here on the Scotch Road, because it's about a 45-minute ride from my part of town, and you can get a nice wide variety of trails. And if you're out here at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can still get in a couple of hours of riding and be home by noon. After we'd had enough fun farting around in the sand pit, we decided to head over and take a look at Black Lake. Now, Black Lake is a spot, if you watched any of our really early videos, we spent a lot of time trying to get across Black Lake. It's actually a road that basically just tapers off into the lake. I think it actually was an abandoned rail line. The tracks were ripped up. It became a trail, and beavers built a dam and flooded part of the road. So you can see here, it's a really nice gravel kind of packed road, and then it just disappears into the lake. The gravel continues underwater, and then you come out the other side. That part is really doable as long as your air intake's not too low. The problem is that once you get beyond this, there's a lot more deep water. So you gotta be in the mood to do it, and if someone drops a bike and it sucks in some water, it can turn into a bit of an ordeal. So on this day, because we were on a tight schedule, we certainly were not gonna take a swim. We were just gonna go take a quick look. The water here too is a little higher than usual. Usually this part of the trail doesn't actually have any water. And we know once we hit that culvert, you're right here up to the edge of the lake. And you can see, and as I've mentioned in other videos, up on the right, on the right-hand side there where you see those lily pads, that's probably 7-8 feet deep. So you definitely don't want to go off too far to the right. Here you get a little better sense of what happens when the trees change. If you're from a part of the world where you don't see this, it is kind of pretty. And a lot of people will come to look at this in this time of the year, so that's another thing we have to take into account. If you're trying to get home on a Sunday, the leaf peepers, as they're called, can be clogging up all the roads, and all of a sudden getting home from the Laurentians to Montreal instead of taking 45 minutes can take you 2 or 3 hours. So this can become quite a tourist attraction. There's one little offshoot of the trail network here that we've never really gone down. We've always driven by this.
What's down there on the right?
And taken a peek and seen all the muck and decided not to. But today, I don't know why, it was just the two of us. We decided we were going to go take a look.
Ooh, it's mucky. Yeah, it looks
You can see here why we might have stayed away from this. We're going downhill here into this muck, and you can see there was guys in here in ATVs, but the ATV boys tend to have a little less trouble with mud than we do. Four-wheel drive is a lot better than one-wheel drive in this situation.
Now, did you see this? Holy shit.
We were sorely tempted, but considering that Chris was on a real tight schedule here, this could not turn into a major endeavor. So we decided to put this on our to-do list for a later date and continue.
Oh, you know what? We've actually been up there. Yeah? Because I have it on my GPS tracks. We went up that hill? I went up that hill. Holy shit.
This is a section where you really do get the feeling this was an old railway line. The trail is actually raised quite a bit from the surrounding terrain. And one thing that always catches us off guard here is you're bombing along, and at one point there's a culvert here that you gotta kind of watch out for. Once again, the beavers have been busy, and there's water here, which is not normally the situation. Sometimes you might see it in the spring, but having it here in the fall is a little unusual. So the official animal of Canada has been busy at work in this neighborhood. The next obstacle is the pipes, and the pipes is one of these obstacles where sometimes you just hit it and you fly through, and other times you actually struggle a bit. But on this particular day, the water was pretty low, hit something down there, but got through it without too much drama. And here you can see the water level is not very high. In the spring, this area here would be quite a bit deeper. And now Chris is trying to get through here without getting his feet wet, because Chris really hates getting his feet wet. As you can hear, Chris and I are on the intercoms. Now the next spot is a little wet spot that's been here for years, except I don't know if it was due to some erosion or the beavers once again, but all of a sudden this little area that used to be a trickle was actually really deep, and it totally caught me off guard. And Chris had the advantage of seeing me splash through, so he got a little bit of warning. Now the reason I'm stopping here is because I did jam on the brakes pretty good there, and that's when I realized I still had my ABS on. And unlike some newer, shinier machines, the ABS on this generation of BMW is not the kind of ABS that you want to leave on when you're off-road.
Take a look. Oh, it's all right. It's not too deep.
Next up is the unnecessary water crossing. Chris decided to go for it, so I went up on the perfectly usable bridge that is right beside this water crossing to get a good vantage point of Chris's crossing.
Here come some bikes.
And as Chris was crossing, another dual sport motorcycle pulled up to watch the show. We hadn't actually been down some of these trails in over a year. So, given the fact that that water crossing had changed, we decided to visit a few other spots. This we knew was a dead end, but we decided to check it out. And if you've seen our video where there was an abandoned Pontiac Transport here, this is that same bar. When we got back to the bridge, there was actually 3 motorcycles. So being the social types, we decided to stop and have a chat.
Hello. Good, how are you?
You guys inspired me to buy this bike. I wanted to tell you that. I knew we'd cross paths one day. Good to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you guys.
We were up at the Tim Hortons over there. I saw you guys go by and I was like, it's got to be there. You guys are still having fun?
Yeah. Yeah, we have. This is the first time we've been down here this year.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot of riding up around St. Donat, Chertsey.
Yeah. Have a good time, guys.
Thanks. You too.
Yeah.
After a quick chat, we were back on the trail once again. I was in the lead with Chris following. Chris and I did a little loop, and then we ended up back on kind of the main road here. And we caught up to our newfound friends here. And this is always a little bit tricky when you're trying to pass people you don't know. And you don't want to kind of seem like a jerk and run up behind them and start honking and whatever. So usually I'll just sit there for a little bit of time anyways and hope that they see me and then try to pass without spraying them with rocks. A little farther down the trail we came upon an area that we call White Acres, and this is an area, if you ever do the ride called the Classique, which is the big dual sport ride here in Montreal in the spring, which has about 400 riders. A lot of these areas you're seeing here will be part of the Classique. Now this is a really nice steep downhill, and you can see there's some pretty good erosion. So Chris is skirting along the left-hand side here. And through the magic of the GoPro, this hill looks flat, and those crevices look like they're 6 inches deep, but some of them were a couple of feet deep at least.
Oh, fuck. Oh, dude. What? I'm T-busing. What, really? The rear end started to go. Do you need my help? No, I think I got her. Yeah, the rear end started to head for the pit. Head for the pit. You know what? This is way easier than the last couple times we did this. Okay.
We made it down to the bottom, and here you are riding along with Chris. This was some pretty greasy stuff down here, and Chris decided to skirt those deep ruts by heading over to the right.
I don't know if you'll fit.
And you can see that front tire just shot out from under him.
Yeah, I just put.
Now we were at the bottom of the hill, and just before you would start climbing again, there was this one low wet spot. And it's a weird little spot where, depending on whether you go left or right, you can really get kind of bogged down here.
I think it's fine. Go right through the middle. Yeah. I'm thinking that's just don't hit the stick.
And oddly enough, going right through the middle, where it almost looks the worst, is the easiest way to get through.
I think I'm going to go left. That's where he got stuck. I'm not going into that, though. Straight through. Whoa! Oh, shit. But, help. Make it? Nope. I don't know yet. Still trying? Yep. I'm gonna keep going, because that's how optimistic I am. I got it. Fuck, man,
And Chris, for some unknown reason, despite recommending I go through the middle, decided to go to the left and barely made it through.
like 2.5 feet. I don't remember what we did and what was success and what was not. Let's go this way.
A little farther along, we came to a really slimy looking hole, and it looked like people were bypassing it to the right. So I decided to go to the right, but that also was pretty sketchy, and it looked like it was going to be tough to get through with one-wheel drive. So I ended up having to kind of back up, and Chris decided to just go through the middle and see what happened.
That was fun. Sorry, I rolled it on it the wrong way. Rev limiter. Hey, haven't heard that on your bike before. No, we cleaned the carbon out.
It was really too soft for me to turn the bike around by myself, so Chris came back, and with me pushing and Chris pulling, it was still a lot of effort to get the 800GS out of this little dead-end bypass. You get a little glimpse of the front tire in some of these shots, and you can see how gooey and sticky this stuff is. So we decided to just try to get over to the edge of this big swamp hole, and then I would just drop down into the hole, which was about a foot or so drop, and then try to spin my way out. Sometimes these holes, the bottoms actually have pretty decent traction. The way it kind of worked here, the logistics of it, it was a little bit easier for Chris on the low side to kind of jump on. So Chris ended up riding it out of this little hole. And of course, the only thing better than being sprayed in the face with stinky muck is being sprayed in the face by stinky muck that's coming off the tire of your own motorcycle. Well, it is Sunday, August 28th, 2014, and we were off White Acres Road in Ontario. Just went through a little bit of a mucky spot. It was a little slimy in there. Had to do a little pulling. And now Chris is giving back to nature. So we headed out this morning, 7 bells, went to Timmy Ho's in Hawkesbury, did the Scotch Road, the sand pit, a little bit of the trails behind it, and then bumped into a bunch of guys that recognized us from the web, had a nice chat with them, including a guy who just had his learner's permit and his Kawasaki had 2,000 kilometers on it. And now we're down White Acres. I don't think we've been down here before this trail.
No, we have been. I
think so?
Doing this. I remember telling you bypass to the right.
Yeah?
And that tree wasn't down at the time.
Ah, okay.
But I don't know where this goes.
It must go where we want to go.
It's definitely going somewhere. And it may end up with us turning around. I have a vague recollection of doing that bypass
I thought
backwards.
so. Yeah, there's a vague memory here of
something
happened. There's a lot of trees down from that wind, I guess.
Yeah.
I noticed there's quite a few more trees
Whatever.
down.
You know what? We are capable.
We have a saw now, too.
We do?
We have a saw.
Now you're just adding shit to the arsenal all the time.
Well, my bike's so light.
Right, that you can afford to add more stuff.
I find that it's so skittish due to the light weight that I'm loading it down with more and more ballast. Every good sailor knows ballast is key.
Right.
And since we spend a bit of time in the water...
Yeah. All right.
Better?
Feel good? Yeah, now I need some water.
Yeah. All right. Make like sheep and get the flock out of here. Okay. All right. I'll keep going down here.
The last section of this trail does have a few more wet and greasy spots, but we managed to make it through without too much drama, and then it eventually dumps you out on a nice gravel road.
I follow you.
We did a series of back roads, which eventually turned into kind of 2-lane roads, which eventually took us to the highway. And then we were cruising down the highway, having a nice chat on the intercom, when Chris started feeling something strange in his rear end. And let's face it, nobody likes feeling something strange in their rear end. So we pulled over to take a look.
Got a spot? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We have a mechanical failure. What happened? I don't know. Hot?
No. Well, no, it is hot.
Not hot as... Oh! Yeah. Burning hot. Maybe your brake is stuck.
This was where we first did some roadside tests, where we noticed that there seemed to be a lot of lateral play in Chris's rear wheel. And if you actually watched one of our other videos, you'll see we measured it and it was quite a bit out of spec. But on a Sunday morning, with Chris having to be home, there wasn't much we could do about it here. So he decided to mount up, hit the highway, and head home. We did successfully make it back to the city, and here you can see the orange julep, which is kind of a famous landmark here in Montreal, which is like an orange Julius, I guess you would call that in the United States. It's kind of a mix of orange juice and yogurt, I think. So Chris was heading home, but I was going to meet Dave here, and then Dave and I were just going to go for a little ride around the city. But in a few short weeks, it would actually be Dave and I back on the Scotch Road. Hey folks, it's Saturday morning, not Sunday morning, and I'm about to head off on a ride. It's going to be Dave and I, because Chris's HP2 is still dead in my garage. And there is Chris's HP2 with the packed up final drive. Makes a very handy place to lean your ramps up against. And this is what a running BMW looks like. So I'm heading out. It's been raining pretty heavy for the last little while, so I imagine there won't be much dust, and probably it'll be a little bit mucky. Now don't go too close to the pipes because it's a bit deep. I said don't go too close to the pipes. Go about here. So here I am back with Dave at the pipes, and you can see in, I think it was about 3 weeks, how much things could change. And this water was a lot deeper, and now we're into October, so it was also a lot colder. And Dave, at this point, back in 2014, he's still on his
my feet are soaked.
700GS. He was a lot more tentative back then because he had really just started riding off-road. Yeah, but you know what's kind of nice? Is that when you're riding and stuff like this, you're always trying to avoid getting your boot full of water. And once it's done, then you can just relax and enjoy the ride.
Well, that was fun. Different.
The water's fresh.
Yes, it is cold.
Fresh!
Now I have very cold feet.
I had my second GoPro with me, so we decided to mount that on Dave's crash bars to get a different angle. Having been down here a few weeks ago, I knew that this next little water crossing was actually going to be considerably deeper than it had been in previous years. But with the high water level, it still kind of caught me by surprise. Here you can see on Dave's bike, the F700 here only has a 19-inch front wheel. So it's, you know, what, halfway up. So a foot deep, I guess. Dave and I didn't have any plans for doing anything crazy today. We were just going to visit some old haunts, and Dave just wanted to get a little more time in under his belt, riding gravel and doing some kind of moderate off-road trails. And a little farther along, there's a spot where there's this really muddy section off to the right-hand side of the road, and sometimes the ATV guys will play in there. But the first thing we noticed was there was a big KTM stopped in the road, and then when we looked into the mud, there was a Jeep Cherokee stuck.
What's happening, Dave?
Well, we've come down the Scotch Road, and there's some guys with a Jeep with awesomely slick tires who have stuck themselves in a ditch.
All right.
And we found another.
More fun than us.
We found another gentleman with a KTM who has got himself a very large log.
All right. Let's help them.
We took a look in the back of the Cherokee, and we noticed that the only off-road recovery equipment our friends here had was a bag of croissants and a very short piece of sketchy-looking rope. So everybody kind of chipped in. So we had the guys from the Jeep, we had the guy on the KTM, and Dave and I. And we got a couple of logs, and by wedging them under the front of the truck, we were able to get it unstuck for about 20 feet. Then it got stuck a little bit again, and with a few more shoves, we got it unstuck. I don't think the fact that he was running kind of summer tires really helped either.
It works.
It started raining, and we all set off together, so I was in the back, our newfound friend on the KTM was in front of me, and Dave was in the lead, and we rode down to the end of the Scotch Road. We bid our new friend goodbye, and then it was time to take a peek at the GPS and decide what we were going to do next. We made the decision to just take kind of the scenic long way home. It was raining, it was cold, all of our feet were wet. We eventually got back to Hawkesbury and pulled into the lot of the Deja Vu bar, and over a pint decided that even though the season was getting pretty close to the end here, we're talking late October now, that we would try to squeeze in at least one more ride on the Scotch Road. The season was definitely getting a little closer to the end than the beginning, and I guess we were perhaps closer to the beginning of the end when we decided to go back to the Scotch Road. You can see Dave driving up here into the trailer. What you can't really see is how slippery that trailer is. I'd had it oiled to stop it from rusting, and that in combination with the kind of fungus covered and wet leaf covered plywood meant that yeah, we should have been wearing full body armor and helmets to get these bikes into the trailer, but we did manage to survive and head off on our way on this kind of dreary looking day. By the time we got to the parking area near the Scotch Road, though, things were looking up.
Dave, why did we trailer today?
We trailered today because the weather is appalling. It's pouring with rain. It's at least minus 10 degrees. It's just abysmal. You can see that with all the blue sky around that it's just terrible. So
There's so much water in the sky?
There's so much water in the sky that we thought we were too wimpy to actually do it properly, so we trailered. In fact, the wettest part of our journey so far has been the trailer.
Yeah, we've actually had more risk with the greasy trailer floor. Has been more
We've really fallen over twice.
Yeah, this is actually a greater source of potential death and dismemberment than off-road motorcycling.
It's a damp trailer that has been freshly oiled as well. So it's
Yes, we got it sprayed.
I think we just like slipped in and sliding.
Yeah, had the trailer sprayed for rust, so now it's wet and oily. Look, it's blue, the stuff. Ugh.
What is that? What is that?
That's...
What have you been doing to your trailer, Riley? I know you like it, but man, that's a bit too much.
Hold on, we need a mark. It'd be interesting to see what the range is, considering that we're using the two different systems.
Mine is supposed to be up to 900 meters.
Dave had grown tired of Chris and I saying nasty things about him over the intercom, so he had tracked down a used system, and he was now on the net with the rest of us. If you've watched this video from the beginning, you'll see that a lot of this is the same area. One thing you'll notice is that in 3 weeks, most of these trees have gone from having their pretty brightly colored leaves to having no leaves at all. So this is the weekend before Halloween, and even though you can ride legally here in Quebec up until mid-December when the snow tire law kicks into effect, realistically for us, end of October, a couple of weeks into November seems to be when our enthusiasm for being wet and cold peters out. Here we are once again rolling up to the famous Black Lake, and you can see Dave's suspension working pretty hard. The F700s don't have as much travel as the F800s, and this is a conventional fork as opposed to the upside down fork on the 800s. Dave would eventually sell this bike and buy an 800. But anyways, we're heading down to Black Lake to take a look, and this was in 2014, it's now 2019. Dave, we realized, has never taken a bike across Black Lake, which is kind of an initiation thing with the awesome players. So for this summer, it is on our to-do list. If Dave wants to keep the nickname Super Dave, he's going to have to get across Black Lake and then all the other watery sections that follow. It was probably somewhere around 10 degrees Celsius now, but with the sun shining, it was feeling pretty nice. So we weren't in a hurry. We decided to set up some shots. So I put the GoPro down on this nice stretch of straightaway, and the idea was that we would blast by it and get kind of a sexy shot.
Oh, the walking. Da-da-da. Well, I think it's a good thing we decided early this morning that it was going to be horrible and rainy and cold, and we had to wear our long johns and ride in the truck drinking coffee, and I'm actually sweating, and it's beautiful.
I'm glad I think it's jacket.
Okay, Dave, you want the bad news or the bad news?
What's the bad news?
It wasn't recording.
You're shitting me.
I shite you not. Or is it recording and I can't see? Nope. Take two, spin her around.
Such a doofus.
I think the word you're looking for is douchebag. The good news is now we can both go by.
Hey, let's do it.
All right.
So Dave zipped by, and then I decided I was going to try and cut it a little bit closer and then get hard on the gas.
Let's see what happens here. Man, that must have been pretty good, because look.
Oh, yeah. You got a big...
The Expendo Cam! Don't worry, Expendo Cam. We still love you.
We do love you.
This is why it's always nice to keep one of the older generation GoPros that you're not too worried about. And once again, that just shows how tough these cameras are. We have never really lost one unless we've let water get at it. And once we lost one because we did not have it in its waterproof housing, and water got in there. And recently we had one up in the Fundy Adventure Rally go, and that was just in a torrential, non-stop, all-day rain fest, and I didn't have the door closed properly and water got in there and destroyed it. But short of getting the camera wet, they're pretty much indestructible. And on the new ones, I think from the 5, 6, 7, the camera itself is waterproof. So unless you're really going to go deep, you don't even need the waterproof housing.
Head back and hang a right.
I actually went back into my emails to figure out when I actually met Dave. And Dave contacted me through the email address he found at awesomeplayers.com and dropped me a note in May. He had just bought his BMW and was watching some of our videos when he sent me a note just to say he was enjoying the videos, and then sent me a few more notes asking questions about which tires to buy and just general chit-chat. And we actually only went for our very first ride together in July. So that was July of this year, and now it's October. So Dave is only 3 months, 4 months into his off-road career here. So he's doing pretty well. One of the pluses of doing these kind of rides together with people you don't really know is I find you get to know people a lot quicker. You know, they say you should travel with someone to really get to know them or live with them, but you can certainly learn a lot about a person by riding off-road with them. You're going to find out pretty quick if your newfound friend shares your sense of humor, shares your tolerance for adversity, and also, probably most importantly, is going to be the kind of person you can count on, perhaps when the chips are down a little. And even though I hadn't known Dave too long at this point, it was pretty apparent that he was cut from the same cloth as the rest of the guys I ride with, and many years later, Dave is now one of the core members of the head office here in Montreal of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club. We got to the pipes, which the previous ride had been a little bit deeper with a little bit more current, and since we were on this leisurely pace, we decided to take the time once again to mount up the cameras and get some interesting shots. So we mounted one of the cameras on Dave's crash bar hanging down, hoping that we would be right down in the water. And then we took the old GoPro, which we call the Expendo Cam, and I had a little mini tripod, and we stuck that right almost in the water on the other side of the pipes so that we could hopefully put together a nice little montage. The camera was hanging upside down, so we had to rotate it in post. It was all looking pretty cool until Dave found a rock and hit the camera on the rock, which kind of folded the camera up. The camera at the exit, though, got a nice shot before Dave's bow wave knocked it over.
That jacket would be strapped.
Then it was my turn on the F800.
All right.
Dave hasn't been in a lot of our videos at this point, so we decided to keep the camera on Dave's bike and he could be in the spotlight today. So I went up ahead, repositioned the Expendo Cam at the next crossing, and waited for Dave to come along. But Dave kind of botched it here and didn't quite make the spectacular shot that we wanted, so we sent him around for take 2.
Yeah, we need you to make it through in one shot. But we need some spray, Dave. It's going to be hard to get up to 110 in that short, in that little amount of time, isn't it? All right, here we go. Give her!
Take 2 was much more scenic. You can see the water here's got kind of a brown tinge to it. Sometimes that's just, I think, rotting, vegetable matter. But in a lot of areas where there's beavers, that's just the beaver's bathroom. And you definitely don't want to drink that water, or you'll get something called beaver fever, and it's not the kind you get on spring break. After leaving our regular haunts, Dave and I just started exploring. So we did about a half an hour of 2-lane, and then we just started looking for interesting stuff on the side of the highway. And we came to this funky road that was nicely graveled with this really bright white gravel. It eventually dead-ended like so many of these roads do, so we hung a U-turn and headed back to the main road to continue our quest for new places to ride. We eventually saw something off the main road, and this turned out to be pretty decent. A nice steep hill climb here. Can see the limited front travel of the F700 being used quite well. One of the things we've never been really good at is keeping track of all these trails. We all have GPSs, but we don't kind of keep track of where we've been or interesting places we'd like to go that maybe we saw a trail off to the side and we'd like to come back and check it out. So yes, we have some ways to go in terms of taking maximum advantage of owning these magical navigational machines. We doubled back to the Scotch Road, and it was there that I could smell something.
All right, we're stopped on the side of the Scotch Road because we took a moment to change the batteries on the GoPro, and lo and behold, I smelt oil. And now we're trying to track down where it's coming from. It looks like my rad might have overflowed a bit, so I'm not sure if it's just the radiator overflowed and there was a ton of oil on the front of this motor from the valve cover leak. And I don't know if it's just the hot coolant has washed some of the oil down, because I see what looks like the coolant overflow.
Or it's sprayed up.
It's sprayed, because that's what it does. It'll actually shoot up on these 800s. Guys will say you actually see it shoot up, but let's see if the fan's going to come on, because your fan was coming on and mine wasn't.
It's too thin for engine oil, and
It's
green.
coolant with... Like, why isn't the fan coming on? What's the plan?
We're going to let the bike run until she either runs out of fuel or explodes.
And then we'll
I'm
know.
basing money on explosion first,
Sure,
because
yeah,
at
you know
least
what?
I've got fuel.
That smell is coolant.
Yeah, it's
It's got
not
that
oil.
sweet, sickly
It's,
smell. So it bubbled over there. Yeah, it's all wet, the cap.
The expansion tank.
It bubbled over. But why didn't it
Tell you.
kick the fan on? Because I remember you said on the intercom, "Hey, my fan's on,"
Yeah, it's the first time it's been on all day.
and mine didn't.
So
We forgot to bring some other stuff to cook.
we had a lot of smoke coming out of the top of the bike. So the explosion just wasn't quite there.
No, I think it's running, but the fan's not coming on. I wonder if it's something stupid like a failed thermostat. Anyways,
It's annoying because you've got to go to BMW for that.
one thing's for sure, if we just get into second or third gear, it's going to run a lot cooler than chugging around like we were.
Okay, so you want to head
Because
back
the
out.
temperature gauge isn't going up.
Which way do you want to go?
Straight home.
Okay.
That's going to be the fastest.
No, let's not go through the pipes or anything. Let's just stay on the road and get
Stay
out.
on the road. Time to get this beater bike back to the trailer.
Once I got the bike home, I did end up re-bleeding the coolant system. I think there might have just been air in it because I never had any more leakage and the bike never got hot, so that was a relief.
All right, I'm going to go right in.
We got back to the truck
Which side am I on?
and loaded the bikes up, and once again strapping them down with my new strap bar 9000, which is that bar I added across the front of the trailer. is so much nicer. It keeps the straps at a nice 45-degree angle. You don't have to crank down on them like crazy. The bikes don't move around. It is lovely. Since we were in movie making mode and we weren't in a rush, I decided I'd really like to get that shot where the truck drives over the camera. So the Expendo cam went down on the ground one more time. That poor camera really does take a beating. This would be our last ride of the year without snow, and it was kind of nice that because we were just in a super laid back mood, we actually took the time to stop and set up some video shots. That's one of the things that, you know, we just don't do a lot of. We're really usually focused on the riding and having people ride ahead and stop and wait and having people drive by the camera and I didn't get the shot and could you do it again. I find for the most part that's just a little too disruptive for the style of riding I do. A lot of the times when I'm doing the editing, I regret not having taken the time to take more shots and have more angles, but in the kind of the heat of the moment of the ride, I sometimes just like to think about the riding and not the videos. And there's lots of rides I've been on where I don't even turn the camera on. There's just certain days I'm just not into it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about anything at all, drop us a line here on YouTube. You can also head over to awesomeplayers.com where you can pick up one of our stickers. You can head over to Facebook as well and drop us a line there, or even better, send us a picture or let us know what you're doing. So once again, thanks for watching another little adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club.